I didn't raise my voice when the HOA president barged into the meeting room waving photos of my damaged fence like she'd cracked a major criminal case. I didn't bother pointing out that the damage she was complaining about was caused by her own board members 2 weeks earlier. Instead, I just slid a thin folder across the table, watched their lawyer open it, and waited for the exact moment he realized what he was looking at. His eyes froze first. Then his mouth tightened. Then he quietly excused himself to make a phone call, which, in lawyer language, is the professional equivalent of a full-body panic attack. The room went completely silent after that. Even the president, who normally filled silence like it was oxygen, stopped mid-sentence and sat down. Nobody likes discovering that the land they've been trespassing on belongs to the one person they've spent 2 years trying to bully. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Pause. 2 years earlier, I moved into that lakeside community with only one real goal in mind: peace. Real, uncomplicated, rural quiet. My grandfather had owned that land long before the subdivision even existed. When he passed, he left me the cabin, the shoreline, and a long stretch of woods behind what eventually became the neighborhood. It wasn't much. But it felt like home: wood smoke, loons on the lake at sunrise, and a kind of old-fashioned privacy most people don't believe exists anymore. I restored the cabin plank by plank. Kept it modest. Didn't ask anything from anyone. I rarely interacted with the HOA. I didn't need them. And I definitely wasn't interested in being part of their politics. Life was simple then: coffee on the dock every morning, long walks in the pines at sunset, knowing every tree and bend on land that had been in my family for decades. I didn't buy this place. I inherited a piece of my grandfather's history. And I intended to protect it. Sometimes months would pass without me seeing a single resident, except the occasional dog walker who accidentally wandered up my road. It wasn't perfect. But it was peaceful. Then, one windy Tuesday afternoon, I found the first sign of trouble. A bright orange paper taped to my gate: notice of HOA violation. At first, I honestly thought it was a mistake. It accused me of restricting community lake access by obstructing a public easement. Obstructing. I'd lived there a year and had never seen a single resident come down my private road, let alone use my land. And the HOA didn't have any easement across my property. I knew that because I read the deed cover to cover the day my grandfather gave it to me. So I called the HOA office. Expected an apology. Expected someone to laugh it off as a clerical mix-up. Instead, the president answered. Her voice had that kind of forced politeness that feels like being stabbed with a butter knife. She told me the lake was community access, and, as part of the inclusive spirit of our subdivision, my fence needed to come down. I politely informed her that my fence was on private land, and it wasn't going anywhere. Her tone changed instantly. She said, "We'll see about that." And hung up. I should have known that was only the beginning. Over the next month, I received 5 more violation notices. One claimed my driveway interfered with emergency access. Another said my cabin didn't meet architectural standards. One even accused me of having a non-compliant mailbox. Even though I didn't have a mailbox. I used a P.O. box in town. Each notice came with a fine. Each fine came with a late fee, even though they delivered the notices the same day they issued them. It was obvious what they were doing: manufacturing pressure until I submitted, or broke. I tried diplomacy. I really did. I emailed the board copies of my deed, boundary maps, survey documents, county records, state statutes. I even included the original survey my grandfather received 50 years ago. They ignored everything. The only reply I got was a single sentence: "We cannot make exceptions for non-compliant residents." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Anger burns out too quickly. Something quieter. Colder. More durable. A realization: these people didn't misunderstand anything. They were testing me. And people who think they can push you indefinitely never expect you to push back intelligently. So I stopped writing emails. Stopped asking for meetings. And I started reading. Night after night, I dug through county records, surveyor notes, land use filings, easement histories, anything tied to the original parcel my grandfather bought in 1968. And that's when I found it. The subdivision only existed because the county allowed the developer to run one single access road across a corner of my grandfather's land. And the agreement, recorded, notarized, legally binding, granted the developer conditional access in exchange for annual compensation. Compensation the HOA stopped paying 15 years ago when they took over the subdivision. In other words, the only legal road into the neighborhood ran across my land. And the lake easement they claimed they had, it never existed. The developer asked for one. My grandfather denied it. The county upheld his decision. The more I dug, the stronger my foundation became. I photographed everything: the cut fence posts, tire tracks, shredded violation notices, ignored emails, measurements of their boundary line. I traced original infrastructure maps and confirmed what I suspected: if I withdrew the access agreement, the entire subdivision would be landlocked. Then the fence incident happened. I came home to 3 HOA board members and a landscaper cutting directly through my property line. A full 20-foot section of fencing, gone. They were building a gravel path straight to the water. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply recorded everything. I asked who authorized it. One board member shrugged. The community voted. This is common access now. Another said, if you have a problem, take it up with the board. I did. Just, not the way they expected. For the next 3 weeks, I prepared. I hired a real surveyor. A real land use attorney. We assembled an airtight record. Every time I dropped paperwork off, my attorney skimmed a page and said, they have no idea what they stepped into. We waited until the quarterly HOA meeting. The only time the entire board, their attorney, and residents would all be present. I arrived 10 minutes early. Sat quietly in the back. When they finally called my name, I walked to the front and placed a single folder on the table. The president opened it, frowned, flipped pages, frowned harder. Their lawyer leaned in, scanned the first document. A certified appraisal and easement map. Then the second document, the original conditional easement agreement from 1969. He stopped halfway through when he reached the highlighted sentence, "Grantor retains full authority to revoke access at any time upon failure of payment or breach of agreement." The HOA hadn't paid in 15 years. And the breach of agreement, trespassing, unauthorized construction, was documented on the next page. The lawyer closed the folder and whispered something to the president. Her face drained of color. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply explained, calmly, that according to state law, I was fully within my rights to revoke the subdivision's only road access. Unless the HOA complied with my conditions, repair my fence, pay back 15 years of compensation, cease all harassment, acknowledge in writing that they had no lake access through my property. Silence. Not a breath in the room. Within a month, 3 board members resigned. The president stepped down for personal reasons. All fines were reversed. All violations voided. Contractors rebuilt my fence, correctly this time. The compensation was paid in full, with interest. And every resident received notice: trespassing on my land was strictly prohibited. Now when I drive through the neighborhood, people either wave or quickly avoid eye contact. Either one is fine. My land is quiet again. My fence is untouched. And the lake, the dock, the cabin my grandfather built, they're still mine. Peace returned, not because the HOA learned respect, but because they finally learned the boundary between power and property law. A boundary my grandfather drew 50 years ago, and one I intend to protect for the rest of my life.